You can never go wrong with smoking a rack of pork ribs, or in our case, a half a rack of pork ribs. They seem to be a crowd's favorite in many backyards, and for good reason. Cooking them low and slow gives them a delicious tender bite off the bone texture. But just recently, there seems to be a bandwagon of influencers raving about party ribs. These are ribs that are cut and cooked individually, giving you much quicker results. But do they really live up to all the hype, and are they better than a rack of pork ribs? We'll cut half a rack of party ribs individually and put them up against a whole half rack of pork ribs. We'll slice right into them and find out which truly is the better tasting rib. And we're doing it all here on Al Lunacy Queuing. Welcome back, my good people. Today we start off with a full rack of St. Louis cut ribs. St. Louis cut ribs are basically spare ribs that have been trimmed down into more of a square cut. But sometimes they may need additional trimming. So today we are using our Cutlux Shinobi Series Santoku knife. The core is made from AUS 10 Japanese steel with 66 layers of Damascus stainless steel and a G10 military grade handle. The feel of this handle has to be one of the most comfortable in my collection. Let's start the trimming by straightening out and cutting off some loose ends off each side of the rib. Then we will cut off a little off the left top side since the bone doesn't extend that far into the meat. This will ensure that each rib piece has the bone running from tip to tip. All looks good. Now we will cut half a rack into party ribs using our Cutlux 10-inch bull knife. Made of German stainless steel, this knife makes easy work of cutting through the back membrane and getting our individual cuts. I'll have the link for this and all items used in this video in the video description below. Once we are done with our cuts, I'll line them up so that you can see that we are dealing with 6 individual cuts of party ribs and 7 bones of a half a rack of ribs. Let's start off with the rack of ribs first. Our binders will be some yellow mustard, and we'll rub that in, followed by some Louisiana hot sauce, and we'll rub that in as well. This will help get that mahogany color and allow the seasoning to stick to the meat. Then we'll sprinkle a little bit of table salt on the ribs, followed by our very own vodka rub. Once we have the rub evenly coated across the rib, we'll go ahead and pat it in. Then we'll just repeat the process on the other side. With the rub that's left on the cutting board, we will use to coat the sides of the ribs. All done with our rack of ribs, now let's repeat the same process with our individually cut ribs. Once we are all done, you can see that the binders combined with the paprika and the pepper in the rub really give the ribs a great color. Now let's go outside and get this cook started. Today we are using the Tyfer Sync Gold Duo. This is a wireless thermometer that has 2 slim probes which transmit a signal 10 times stronger than a Bluetooth signal, with 6 position sensors within each probe that send the average temperature to the smart base, giving you an accurate and easy to read temperature without the need to download any apps. We place one probe between the rib bones of the rack, and the display shows the temperature of the meat at 49 degrees Fahrenheit. Now if you'd like to use an app, there is one available. The app for the thermometer is well laid out and easy to set up as shown here, but today we'll be using it without the app. Okay, we've got a rack of ribs in about an hour and a half or so we'll put in our party ribs. Okay, so we went ahead and put our party ribs. Looking at the rack of ribs, there is a little bit of pooling there. Let's go ahead and check the temperature. We readjusted and it did drop a little bit. So we're down at 160 something. So let's go ahead and take this for a ride. It says that this is up to 3,000 feet connectivity. So we're gonna go down the ways. You see those poles out there out towards that building down that street? That's where we're gonna take it and see if it stays connected. Okay, so there's the back shack. You can see that. Let's close the gate here. Have the Tyfer here. Here we go, guys. Now, I'm more of a handheld InstaProbe thermometer guy, but I was impressed by this no fuss setup of this Typher Gold Sync wireless thermometer. The build quality of the smart base felt nice and heavy, has quite of a heavy duty feel to it. Let's see how far it stays connected. So far it's still connected, look at that. We're easily about 100 feet already. More than 100 feet now. Here we go. Continue to go. And just to give you a glimpse of how far we are, you can see the balcony up on top of the back shack. It's quite a ways. And we're still on. Let's keep going. Wow, easily about 300 feet. Easily. And we're still connected. Okay, I did get I don't know if it dropped connectivity or what. Okay, we just dropped right here. So there's the railroad tracks. And if you can see, it's still searching. Very, very far. So there was the wall of the back shack, the fence line, and the small incline from the street that may have obstructed our signal, but still, 600 feet of connectivity is pretty darn good. Quite impressive. Let's get back to our cook. Comparing the Sync Gold probe temperature to the Typher InstaProbe temperature, there was only a couple of degrees in difference. Our rack of ribs were already in the 190s while our party ribs were in the high 150s. I was trying to time it where both would come out around the same time, but our rack of ribs were a little bit ahead of schedule. At around the 3.5 hour mark, I went ahead and took out the half a rack of ribs to sauce them up while we wait for the party ribs to hit 190 degrees. We'll put them in an aluminum tray with a few pats of butter and barbecue sauce. We'll go ahead and remove the wireless probe from the rack. We'll be using the handheld thermometer from here. But here's a quick screenshot from the app just before we took out the ribs. The drop in ambient temperature on the chart is when we added the party ribs to the smoker. I think the smaller ribs are ready to be taken out. We'll put them in the pan. This one looks like it's ready to go too, but these bigger ones still need a ways to go. Take this one out. So for the party ribs, we rotated them occasionally so that all sides got a crisp. That's the advantage they will have over the full rack of ribs. In comparison, the rack of ribs hit the 190s at about the 3.5 hour mark, while the last of the party ribs hit the 190s at about an hour and 45 minutes. Okay guys, these are all sauced up, including on the bottom side. So let's go ahead and wrap it up with the aluminum foil. Let's finish them off. With all the ribs wrapped up in the foil tray, both set of ribs should probe tender and hit the 200 plus degrees in about 30 minutes. Then we will remove both set of ribs and put them back on the smoker so that the barbecue sauce can caramelize for about 15 minutes. Oh yeah, they're probing tender and they're 200 plus. These are ready to go. So we're finally in the last stretch of the cook. 15 more minutes should caramelize the barbecue sauce on top of the ribs. Both sets of ribs have a nice color and the meat has slightly pulled to expose the bone tip on both sets of ribs. So let's take a look at the half rack first. We have a total of 7 bones on this half rack. The rack feels tender and bendable to the touch and smells absolutely delicious. Next are the party ribs, and we will place them one by one on the cutting board for a total of 6 party ribs all together. The ribs feel more crispy to the touch but smell just as delicious. And just for presentational purposes, we'll garnish both sets of ribs with some chopped parsley. So finally, here's a few bits of information I learned from this cook in comparing both sets of ribs. The party ribs took a total of 2 hours and 30 minutes of cooking time, while the rack of ribs took a total of 4 hours and 15 minutes of cooking time. Presentation-wise, I give it to the rack of ribs. They just look more appealing than the party ribs. Now, as far as flavor, the rack of ribs get seasoned, taken, smoked, and get caramelized only on the top and bottom, while the party ribs get seasoned, smoked, and caramelized all the way around. Next comes the issue of serving time. For the rack of ribs, it is more work since each rib must be cut individually after the cook, while the party ribs can be served immediately after the cook. So cooking these pre-cut party ribs definitely saves you time, but at what cost? I found that a rib cut off the rack of ribs retained more meat around the bone as compared to the party ribs. This could be that moisture is expelled from all sides of the party rib as it cooks, so the meat may shrink around the bone, while on the rack of ribs, moisture is only expelled from the top since the membrane on the bottom of the rib helps keep the moisture in. This became more evident during the taste test. The cut from the rack of ribs tasted very moist, super meaty, and tender to the bite. Just the way I like my pork ribs, meat only falls off when you bite into the rib. Next came the taste test to the party rib cut. Great color and caramelization all the way around. The taste was more towards the bite off the bone feel with a crispy edge all the way around, but not as moist or meaty or tender as the cut from the rack of ribs. They were definitely tender, but not as tender. Still, I'd be happy to be served either rib. Both were delicious, but I have to give the slight edge to the cut from the rack of ribs. Honestly, if it wasn't that I tasted one after the other, I wouldn't be able to tell you which one I prefer if they were done in different cooks. So that's why I felt that smoking a half a rack as party ribs and the other half as whole would give us a better perspective. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let us know what you think in the comments. Which way do you prefer to cook your ribs? I'll have all the links for the items featured in the video. I hope you all are staying cozy and warm this winter season. If you are new to the channel, please give us a like and a subscribe. I hope to see you again very soon. Till next time, take care of yourself and each other. We'll see you on the next one.